What's up, YouTube? This is your boy Alex, and today is Tuesday. So it's going to take probably 2 or 3 hours for the video to upload. And this video is going to be on both channels, so you're still getting the same video that I promised you that's going to drop less than 24 hours from now. That's going to be July 1st. And that is, I talked about doing the video. I didn't want to wait until 2 weeks into July, so I decided why not do it the first week of July. And celebration of Comic-Con, this is going to be a very long and lengthy video, so I apologize. It might get broken into 2 parts, might even be broken into 3 and 4 parts, so just bear with me. It's going to be a long and lengthy video. I will try my best to get it under 30 minutes, 35 minutes. It's not a guarantee. It might end up being 40 to 45 minutes. Title of the video is going to be called Sex Game, the top 14 greatest action comic books in films of all times. We're talking about 14 of the best comic book films. The best of the best. That would be considered the greatest. So let's get to it, shall we? Coming in at number 14 is going to be 1994's The Crow. What do you get when you get a guy with a guitar and a rock band, some face paint, a bird, and a guy that comes back with supernatural powers and fights crime? You get Brandon Lee and you get The Crow. That first film for me as a kid was very badass, very epic. You know, I got introduced to a new genre of music. All I was used to was just rap music, R&B. And when I heard the way Brandon Lee got ready to play this character, it was something new, something different for himself and for an audience. And that same year, or that leading up to it, he had just getting ready to do probably the last 40 minutes of that movie because my dad was a mailman at that time. And my dad had just brought his mail to him, and then that same day he goes and does the movie, and he tragically passes away. Now they did finish the movie, and you know the first Crow it stands to the test of time. You could fast forward 20 something years later, and that film, there's nothing that compares to that first film of The Crow. Yeah, there was the second one, the third, the fourth, the fifth. You know, there's 4 films that came after it, but they never got onto the same level of greatness. Brandon Lee was the reason why that movie was so successful. You know, and to this very day, they can't seem to never get the secret formula done right. You hear talks, they're going to reboot it. Every time they try to cast an actor, nobody wants to be a part of that project because of what happened in that, you know, that first set. I do believe that eventually we will get a Crow reboot. It might be a good film, but it just won't never be as good as the first one. And this film was good, and it was great. In fact, Brandon Lee broke the barrier because that movie made millions of dollars. In history, movies before and after never got to that magnitude. And the only movie to ever do something like that is on this list. We will always remember Brandon Lee, God rest his soul, rest in peace, the son of Bruce Lee. Coming in at number 13 as a tie is Robo Cop and He-Man. Now, both these movies came out in 1987. Oh, yeah, it was the 1980s. I was born January 1986. And as a kid, the first movie I actually got to see was RoboCop. Movies like Terminator, I didn't see until I was like almost 7 or 8 years old. But when I first saw RoboCop, that was, for me, it was RoboCop. I mean, the fact that the guy was a cop, you know, he was checking on crime, he was in Detroit, and the fact that they gave him a catchphrase, he was badass, he had a weapon that made a loud noise, he was indestructible, he walked through walls, and the fact that he could just take on so much brute force was interesting to me because at that time, science fiction was like not being taken serious in Hollywood, and this movie kind of made you take science fiction very serious, you know, because it kind of broke a lot of barriers where people weren't into science fiction like that. They were into action and westerns and real drama. They weren't really into science fiction. And they took a little bit of some horror and some science fiction and made it futuristic in the modern time. And what do you got? You got RoboCop. Stop. taking out crime, no smoking. Those were some good catchphrases in the movie. And Peter Willard was really good at Robo Cop. I mean, he got to be in 2 films. And it's spin-off sequels. You got a Robo Cop 2, Robo Cop 3. You eventually got a Robo Cop reboot. You got a television show. So it's spun off 4 films, a television show, a cartoon, a comic book, video games, action figures, posters. And the fact that they're bringing RoboCop back to cinema is more than enough reason to get pumped up to want to see another RoboCop. On the other hand, you have He-Man. When Doug Logan was in his prime, when he was doing these types of Hollywood films, he done the James Bond film, he had done Rocky 4, and he did another movie, and it was called He-Man. To have a guy 6'4", 250 pounds of rock solid muscle and a badass sword, and he's from another planet, it was like there's Thor and then there's He-Man. You give Thor a hammer, you give He-Man a badass sword, and he goes up to the sky and the lightning hits the sword. Give me the power, He-Man. I mean, yeah, the lines were corny. They weren't exactly perfect, but you got a film in He-Man. And, of course, we got a reboot, which eventually made its way to Netflix. Don't spoil it for me, people. I have not seen it. All right, coming in at number 12 is Batman versus Superman. Now, there's a lot of people who like Batman versus Superman, and there's a lot of people who hate this film. It was produced, it was written, and it was directed by director Zack Ryder. And some of the best action scenes were done by Ben Affleck. Like the way you see Batman fight in the movie was very well done. Now, it didn't exactly live up to the hype of expectations because this movie, for like almost 10 years, people were hyping this film up. Ever since we saw the movie called I'm Legend with Will Smith, there's that scene in the movie where there's a vacated city. Will Smith's walking through the city, and we see a movie sign that says Batman versus Superman, and that started the whole talk. For like almost 10 years, that one movie, I'm Legend, started Batman versus Superman. Ben Affleck's Batman, Henry Cavill's Superman. You get Wonder Woman. For like that long, it was hype. But unfortunately, that's all this movie was. It was just hype. Yeah, it had good action. In certain spots and certain scenes, the movie was good. And in certain spots and certain scenes, the movie fell apart. Some people complained it was too complex, too long. Some people couldn't understand what was the whole point of Batman in the movie, and some people felt that we got too much Superman and not enough Clark Kent. Where Batman versus Superman actually gave us a balance of both Superman, Clark Kent, with some Batman, and then you brought in Wonder Woman. Now, what messed the movie up was introducing Doomsday too early. I felt had you had 3 movies before introducing Doomsday to do the death of Superman, and the movie would have had a bigger impact. And to me, it should have not been called Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Dark Justice. It should have just been called. You could have called it. You could call it something else. And if you were going to do Batman versus Superman, it should have been like the third film. Like, the first one should have been, in my opinion, should have been Man of Steel 2. Then the next movie should have been Batman Legacy or something. And then the third movie, it should be Batman versus Superman. Like, let them have their own film first, and then go right ahead and make them square up. And then when you do the death of Superman, you can have it called, Dark Justice, because they're going to fight a creature. And then that's when you can kick off Justice League for his return. Because this was supposed to kick off the, DC Universe. This was supposed to be the answer to Marvel. And this was like DC's version of Captain America Civil War. So if it weren't for Ben Affleck being Batman and Gal Gadot, because they were the best parts of that movie. And the reason why I call this great is because if it weren't for Gal Gadot's performance as Wonder Woman, this movie probably wouldn't even be on this list. she got by far the biggest standing ovation because when she comes on screen, no one's cheering for Batman or Superman. If you notice that, everyone's cheering for Wonder Woman, and that's why she got her own film. And her movie broke a whole bunch of money. All right, coming in at number 11 is going to be Deadpool. Now, for almost 10 years, Ryan Reynolds kept trying to get executive producers at Fox to do a Deadpool. Give me a Deadpool movie. Give me a Deadpool. That's all Ryan Reynolds kept doing. And finally, it finally happened. We got a character come to life. It was like Deadpool was kind of like The Mask. That first film was good. And the fact that it was so huge that everyone went to go see the film. Like, no one thought this movie was going to do any good. And this movie came real close to be on the verge of breaking close to 1 million. It got real close to doing it. And now, unfortunately, Deadpool 2 didn't live up to the hype as the first one was. And who knows if we'll get a Deadpool 3. But that first film, you had so much in it. You had Colossus, you had Deadpool, you had him fighting a badass villain. He kind of exists in the X-Men world. There was ideas, could we bring Wolverine to the next film? You had so much in that first film that it was badass, it was epic. Coming in at number 10 is X-Men 2. Now, for me, when you talk about all the X-Men films in its entirety, to me, the second one stands out the best because you got a lot of characters. Like, if you were to do Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, follow the blueprints of how the X-Men films were done. The first X-Men film, very well produced, very well directed, very well shot on location. Second one blows the first one out of the water. You see more of Wolverine's past. You see added characters. You see Cyclops. Character gets more explored. You get to see them in real situations. You get to see them actually use their powers in those real situations. And then you get to see what happens that Charles and Magneto clash over right and wrong, who's right, who's wrong. So that's one conflict. You've got Wolverine fighting William Stryker, only to find out that he's created, Lady Deathstrike. So that's two conflicts. Then there's, Jean Grey deciding to use her new powers to save the X-Men, which set up the next story of the Phoenix. So you got like at least 4 conflicts in this film. And you see that they added a bigger cast, which was pretty nice. And Hugh Jackman put on like 35 pounds of muscle and just looked jacked. Like, he really looked like Wolverine. And that's where the idea came from much later to give him a spin-off series where there's Wolverine with the X-Men and then there's Wolverine by himself. And that was a good time to be an X-Men film, when Fox was really kicking ass and taking names. Coming in at number 9 is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, this was a movie that kind of came out the same time as another movie I'm going to announce much later in this video. Now, for me, I actually was old enough to watch this one. That first Ninja Turtle film was almost rated R because producers had a hard time trying to decide, should it be PG-13, should it be rated R, should it be a movie, should it be straight to cable, should it be a video cable release. For almost 5 years, they couldn't decide what to do with the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle film. And when they finally decided to put it out, they did. Now, it was very well received. The fact that it was so serious, like, you got to see 4 badass Ninja Turtles that could do ninjutsu, and a badass samurai who's been around for 50 years, that's in his 50s, who's basically the only one that can stop the Turtles and stop them from messing up his operation, the Foot Clan. And the fact that they did this movie worked. Like, no one thought a movie like this was going to work, and it worked. To me, if it weren't for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you would have never got Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. You would have never got Super Samurai, Big Bad Beetleborg, VR Troopers. You would have not even got Transformers. Because at that time, nobody wanted to touch these properties and turn them into films. Ninja Turtles was like one of those you could make or break your career with Ninja Turtles. In fact, nobody wanted to make superhero movies in the 1980s and 90s. When they did try to make these movies, they would bomb at the box office like really hard. I remember if you wore a Ninja Turtle shirt, or Transformers or He-Man, people laughed at you in the 1970s and 80s and some part of the early 90s. They would laugh at you because they couldn't take this type of, genre serious. And this first Ninja Turtle film, when they saw that it was violent, that it had martial arts and a real story, they took it serious. Now, the second Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle film was a bit watered down, so was the third film. They came back and had a television show when they did our fantasy matchup, the Ninja Turtles versus the Power Rangers in season 1 of Power Rangers in Space, and kicked off their own Ninja Turtle show, which lasts for 2 seasons, and then brought them back to the big screen later with Michael Bay's vision of Ninja Turtles. It was good, but there was something missing from those films. Like the turtle magic that I saw growing up, you didn't see those in Michael Bay's films. And it might be another 5, 6 years before we get an actual Ninja Turtle film concept. Coming in at number 8 is The Dark Knight. It is by far the greatest movie in the Dark Knight trilogy. There's Batman Begins, there's The Dark Knight Rising, but for me, it is The Dark Knight. 2008, saw the movie when it first came out. Me and my friends, we all got off of, my homeboy was working. He went to school, he went to work, and then my other friends, it was like all three of us. And another friend of mine got off of work, and then all four of us went to the theater to go see The Dark Knight. That was the first time in cinema history that I went to a theater where it's packed out. From top to bottom, you could not find an extra seat. Like, I was going to Burger King just so I could, what's the word I'm looking for? Just so I could, get me a soda and some popcorn and actually watch the movie. Like, all of us went to go see the movie. And it was that surreal. You could feel the passion and the emotion when the music hit. When we saw the Joker on the big screen, it was like we were a little kid all over again. It's Batman, it's Joker, it's DC Comics at its best. You got Christopher Nolan, the best director. At that time, Christian Bale was the best actor. And we were all imitating. You saw people wearing Batman shirts, Batman hats. People had the magazines, the comic books. Everyone was pumped up for The Dark Knight. And to this very day, there has not been no movie since that has surpassed it. Like, you can say Avengers and Matrix Reloaded are probably the only movies to actually get onto its level and surpass it. But The Dark Knight set a record that it took quite a while for that record to get broken. Like, it literally took a while for someone to break that record. Dark Knight set the record, and it took a while for that record to get broken. And basically, it was because people really supported that film. Alright, coming in at number 7 is Superman 2 tied with Spider-Man 2. Now, Superman 2 is one of my favorite Superman films. The first Superman film, the original, will always be the best. Superman 3 with Richard Pryor is very good, not great. Superman 4 sucked. Please don't watch Superman 4, it's terrible. But Superman 2, box office gold. And there's like 2 different versions of Superman 2. Of course, the guy who did the Lethal Weapon movies did Superman 2. His version was by far the best. We got a good story with Lois Lane and Clark, not just Superman. And the fact that he got to fight Zod, he got to fight Lex Luthor, and the fact that he had to sacrifice his powers if he wanted to have a normal life with a woman showed some real growth, some real character progression with Superman. And you could tell that when you had the first superhero in comic book history, this is what you would do with a character like Superman. And you can see years later, it still holds up to the best of time. It's still by far the best action-packed comic book superhero movie of all times. It will always be there, and we will always remember Christopher Reeve. Alright, but Spider-Man 2, Tobey Maguire, first actor to play Spider-Man. So you can see why they're tied, right? Christopher Reeve becomes the first actor in cinema history to play Superman, but Tobey Maguire becomes the first actor to play Spider-Man in 3 films. Spider-Man film, box office gold. Spider-Man 2, better than the first one. Unfortunately, Spider-Man 3 with Tobey Maguire was a disappointment. They did a terrible job on Venom. We had the Sandman, we had Green Goblin team up with Spider-Man. And to me, what I thought the third story should have been was Spider-Man fighting the Lizard or the Vulture, and maybe if you get a Spider-Man 4 or 5 with Sam Raimi, then you give us Spider-Man versus Venom, then Spider-Man versus Carnage. But Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man versus Dr. Octopus, that was highly anticipated. Like, that movie broke millions of dollars. When I came to the movie theater, I had never seen so many Spider-Man fans in my entire life that between Spider-Man fans and Batman fans, you can't tell who has the most fans, Batman or Spider-Man. I want to say it's a dead even tie. Spider-Man fans will say it's not even close. So that's why this movie is on this list. All right, coming in at number 6 is The Avengers. Now, The Avengers was the movie that actually broke The Dark Knight's record because it took a while for someone to come to that level, match, and break it. And it broke it. Like, The Avengers didn't just break it, The Avengers broke it. Like, for the first time, we had never had a badass superhero team-up movie on a huge scale. Everyone would say, well, you have the X-Men. You had Fantastic Four, and people say, well, that's like a small superhero group. It ain't nothing like Avengers. You got Tony Stark Iron Man, played by Robert Downey Jr. You got Chris Hemsworth as the Mighty Thor. You got Christopher Evans as Captain America. Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. You got the Incredible Hulk. You got Hawkeye. And that first movie was so badass and epic. You had Nick Fury, Samuel Jackson as Nick Fury. And the fact that they gave all these characters their own movie first and then put them together. And then the ending was breathtaking because everyone kept asking who was going to be the villain after Loki. And we see Thanos get up. He doesn't talk. He looks to one of his lackeys. He has this smile on his face. And you had to watch all the movies building up to Avengers Infinity War and Endgame to try to get to why he had that smile to begin with. That took us on a 10-year journey that I don't think no film before has ever done. And this movie done it. And this movie kept breaking records. And that's an accomplishment feat. Coming in at number 5 is Batman from 1989. Michael Keaton, right? First actor in cinema history to play Batman. Tim Burton helped create Gotham City. For years, I read the comic books, and I always thought, if I was going to direct Batman, how it would look. Tim Burton did it better than anyone could ever do it. We got Batman, we had the Joker, the sequel, Batman Returns, you got the Penguin, you got Catwoman, you got the Mayor. You got to see Batman take on actual Batman villains. And the fact that we had the legendary Batmobile, the Batcave, and the theme song that you heard in the two films, to me, if someone asked me to make a YouTube video called what was the best Batman theme song, hands down, without no question, it is the Tim Burton's theme song because it embodies what Batman actually is. Like, I will always like the Christopher Nolan's theme song to The Dark Knight, but I will always consider Michael Keaton's theme song first. That and the animated theme song of Batman. So that's probably why I like it. And I have the classic Batman throwback t-shirt. And when I heard the announcement of Michael Keaton come back as Batman, the only thing I can think of is, you better have the theme song in the movie because I'm going to be wearing the throwback shirt. Not the modern day Batman, but the throwback Batman with the black and yellow. All right, coming in at number 4 is Logan. You can't do a list without Logan. Now, Logan is considered one of the greatest Wolverine films in trilogy. There's The Origins of Wolverine, there is The Wolverine, and then there's Logan, where the studios took a huge gamble with this film. They said, let's make it rated R. And the movie broke millions of dollars. It was something that we had never seen before. 17 years in the making, that one actor played this one badass comic book character, James Logan Wolverine, Weapon X. And it was like you were going to say a goodbye to somebody in your family, and the way you were going to do it, you watched the movie Logan, that's how you said goodbye to Hugh Jackman. Not Hugh Jackman, the actor, but the iconic character Wolverine you were going to say goodbye to. When I saw that movie, I actually broke down and cried. Because it was a part of my childhood. It was something I grew up with. I always played with the Wolverine action figures, imitated his voice from the cartoon. I would always take pencils from my dad's table stand and put them between my fingers and pretend I was Wolverine. I would pretend the animanium claws would come out, and my dad be like, "Boy, give me these pencils. What's wrong with you? I'm Wolverine." "No, you not." And my mom's like, "Let him do it. He's having fun being Wolverine." And when they made X-Men the movie, I was happy because I got to see how you would try to create Wolverine, and then to have the final movie say, okay, we're gonna finally put a stamp on Jackman playing this character for 17 years. He set a record that probably the only actor in Hollywood can match. Is probably going to be Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man without question. So you have to consider that. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Captain America Civil War. Now, this one was a tough one to put on the list because I couldn't decide should it be Captain America Winter Soldier or should I put Civil War, and I chose Civil War because it had more fighting and more action than the other two films combined. This film surpasses the first film. Captain America First Avenger was like a first time experience for those who had never seen the character before. Winter Soldier was like a geopolitical thriller because it was about a guy who did not like the system and he had to find out that his past caught up with him. And the third film was more of an identity crisis. Are you Captain America from the first film? Are you Captain America of the Avengers? Like, this was, I would call this an identity crisis movie. It was like Bourne Identity versus Iron Man in a way. Because you got a guy who's got a hard time trying to stick with modern times, even though he's not from that time, and having trouble doing the right thing, even though to everyone else it's considered the wrong thing. And this movie was huge because it broke barriers. Like, this movie came out, and this movie was just killing other movies. This movie was in box office for such a long time, it made critical success. This movie introduced us to Chichilio the Black Panther. We saw Ant-Man in the movie. We saw Spider-Man in the movie. And this movie kind of gave us an end credit to let you know the next time you see Black Panther, it was going to be in his movie. And it teased Spider-Man Homecoming. So it's like, what more could you possibly have asked for with this film? Coming in at number 2 is The Black Panther. This movie broke billions of dollars worldwide domestically. Okay, now there is some controversial because some people say this movie should have came out in the summertime. Why this movie come out in February? And what people forget is that Spider-Man and Miss Marvel took the release dates of Black Panther. So they had to change the date on the first film not once but twice. Now, if they make a Black Panther sequel, which they are, it's probably going to be in February. Because again, another movie's took its release date. Now, somewhere in the future, if you make a Black Panther 3 or even a Black Panther 4 or spinoff, yeah, it could be in the summer box office. To me, this is one of those movies where it doesn't matter if you put it in the summer, the fall, the winter, it's still going to kick ass and break records. This thing set 3 records. This thing broke 3 records. And it's one of my most highly anticipated favorite films. It's at number 2 because for so many years, people kept complaining, when are you going to get a black superhero? When are you going to get a black superhero? I said, we got Blade. And people said that, but that's just Blade. When are we going to get the other black superhero, Black Panther? We finally got Black Panther. Some people liked the fact that the movie was good. Some people felt they should have added some more layers and dimensions with the movie. Not everyone is that high on the critical success of the movie. So you got your critics and you got your people who just love the movie. It has something for everybody. You like drama, it had drama. You want action, it had action. You want comedy, it had comedy. You wanted romance, you had romance. You wanted suspense, it had suspense. If you just liked it because it came from a comic book, it had some realism in it. So this movie has something for everyone. So everyone liked it, the movie, for the most part. All right, coming in at number 1. And this is going to be very, very tough to call. I know some of y'all are going to be upset, but it's got to be called. It's going to be Blade tied with the first Iron Man film. Now, the first Blade film was an experimental film because nobody knew if this movie was going to be any good. This was a time in the 90s where they were scared to touch comic books, and turn them into movies and television shows. And Wesley Snipes said for 10 years, let me either play Blade or Black Panther. He chose Blade. You read all of the Blade comic books and you look at Wesley Snipes, he looks just like the comic book character come to life. The character does martial arts, he does martial arts. Blade embody a lot of that Blade represents, and that's what you got with the character. And Blade kind of gave birth, in a way, whether people like it or not, Blade gave birth to the Marvel Cinematic Universe because it was either Blade or Spawn becomes the movie that gives birth to comic book films of today. Spawn did make the cut, it failed. Nothing against Michael J. White, he did the best job he could. The first Blade film, Wesley Snipes did a bang up job on it. He killed it as Blade. You know, he transformed his body. He had the haircut, the look, the style, the jacket, the glasses, the car. And that opening scene where he came in and they're looking like, there he goes, that's him, it's the Daywalker. And he come in smiling like, yeah, I'm about to go ahead and turn this place out. That was Blade. Come on, Daywalker. And he was just hauling and whooping ass in that movie. Now, the second one, Blade 2, was good, but it didn't stand up to the expectations of the first film. Blade 3, which was Blade Trilogy, terrible. It was the worst film in the trilogy. I mean, yeah, Blade versus Dracula, but it's like, y'all could have done better than that. So the first film was good, second film was alright, third film terrible. You made a Blade television show that lasted for one season, which was a story between Blade 1 and 2. And you're getting a Blade reboot, which is why I say, in a way, Blade actually gave birth to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know some people don't want me to say that, but you know it's true. On the other hand, you have Robert Downey Jr. and 2008's Iron Man film, which kicked off a series of sequels and other movie concepts that came from comic books. It all started with Iron Man. Had you not got an Iron Man, because Marvel had that problem. Marvel had a film called Iron Man. This could have made or broke the franchise. Just like when they did Blade, when Marvel had did Blade, that could have made or broke Marvel, and Marvel was successful, but Marvel did not have the rights to their characters no more. And when they got Iron Man, they had the rights to their characters. And Iron Man paid off the same way Blade paid off. You see how both films kind of set the mark, right? The first Blade film, very critical successful. First Iron Man film, very critically successful. Now, some people like Iron Man 2, some people hate Iron Man 2. A lot of people say Blade 2 was good but not great. You see the similarities, right? Everybody hates Blade 3 because of the choice of villain, right? A lot of people hate Iron Man 3 because it wasn't the real Mandarin. You see how both these trilogies only stopped at 3 films? They're going to do a 4th Blade film and it's a reboot. If we get an Iron Man 4, someone else would have to pick up the mantle to be Iron Man, right? So if you think about it, Blade kind of made Iron Man possible. So in a way, Blade actually gave birth to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Iron Man gave us Thor, Captain America,